Hi, my name is Brendan Crosdale, and welcome to the LAN Party. I'm here today with our producer and co-host, Andrew Nelson.
Hello!
The Archmage of the Genophage, Mike McLaughlin.
Hey, guys.
Your best friend, Nate Potter.
Thanks for having me.
And the ever-present Baron of the West End, James Lowry.
Greetings.
We're here today talking a lot about multiplayer. It seems to be the subject at hand. Talking about games with the multiplayer in them. Cooperative, competitive, why we love it. What works, maybe what doesn't work. Hopefully more what does work. I feel like sometimes we trash and we burn. It seems to be the tendency with any discussion about video games.
What? We could just talk about GoldenEye for an hour. And
we could. That would be a lot of what works. Yeah. But yeah, I guess the preface to it would be most particularly is that we all really love multiplayer games. We play a lot of them. We always have. I think the podcast being called the LAN Party is a symptom of the fact that we love playing games with friends.
I'm still somewhat staggered by the fact that I've gotten more involved in the technology and I've gotten more involved with gaming. And technically, I spend more time with my friends than I ever did before.
Yeah. I think gaming as a hobby is one of those things that has become so integrated to a social experience that it's one of its strengths, and it's one of the things I like about it the best. But you guys were the ones most interested in the multiplayer topic. So what's springing to mind? You wanted to discuss it. Where's your passion?
Well, right now it's for PvP content. We've been playing a lot of the Iron Banner and Destiny. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to start off just talking about the competitive, and we can move on to co-op later on.
Sure.
Well, this has a lot of both, really.
Yeah, Destiny does absolutely have a lot of both. And this topic kind of sprung up. James wanted to talk about raids and how they sort of have progressed, and what the good parts of them are, what the bad parts, what the trials that you have to go through to have a good raid group.
For those of you out in internet land, I pretty much missed the massive multiplayer online thing. And the more my friends tried to get me into it, the more I pulled away from it, because it was this whole sort of, I really don't need an addictive game in my life right now, you guys.
Well, okay, so that's the addictive farm aspect of MMOs that seem to be prevalent, or at least were. And I think a lot of them have moved away from the farming aspect. But
it's not that I didn't want to play them. It's just that you'd never see me in the flesh ever again, and I'd come to compulsively fear the sunlight.
And that's what we've kind of talked about Destiny in the past, with how it's turned into kind of a grind to get your gear and your materials and everything like that. And I think that Destiny, even though that's what a lot of the content seems to be right now, since we've already all moved past pretty much all of the available content, is even Destiny has a light farming amount compared to other games.
Yeah,
you do have to put in a lot of work to get your raid setup going, but it's still not that much compared to other games.
It's interesting that you call it farming. Of course, I don't know what else you would call it, but in many other games, when you think about farming, you've got a specific area that you go to perform specific things. And even Destiny has that. Oh, yeah. I need to complete this bounty, so I'll go to this area and make these poor little dregs, regret their existence. But at the same time, like, one of the things that bothers me is when, you guys put so much effort and you're so enthusiastic about going to a raid, and we do really, really good, and then there are the drops, and everybody just starts cursing and spitting, and they get to Raoul, and they verbally abuse Raoul.
Yeah, well, I think farming, kind of the way we know it in modern games, I think is a symptom of multiplayer games, because it's a content gate, and it's an artificial one that they can build, so that if you want to get into a more difficult area within a lot of these games, particularly in MMOs, in order to do that, there's an entry fee that is your gear requirement.
Right, there's a gear check.
Right, and so to do that, you're usually, in a lot of games, gated into a situation where you have to grind content. You have to run X number of missions or dungeons or strikes or something in order to get enough gear to be able to get over the pure math threshold of the raid. And I think in Destiny, that threshold's pretty low. I think the raid content's fairly accessible in it, but it still suffers from that kind of artificial gating, and I think it does rub a lot of players the wrong way to be stuck in a situation like that.
We do swear a lot at Rahul and get, upset about, not getting the drops that we want, but at the same time, I don't mind getting shitty drops. It does bother me occasionally when it's 4 weeks in a row and I've got No Land Beyond 3 of them, and it's just the game giving me the middle finger. But at the same time, I just enjoy doing the content and going through it and sort of the community aspect of it. I mean, I would do the raids in Destiny just for fun without really worrying about the drops. In fact, that's generally what I do. I don't run the content because I want to get a specific drop. That's sort of the icing on the cake of doing the process.
But it's also the carrot and the stick they have you to get in there.
Well,
and I can say
for a lot of players, for me, I would say no. That's not the carrot on the stick. The carrot on the stick is to do the content. I mean, I don't do it to get the gear.
I would say that's a pretty uncommon position.
Yeah, for me.
You would definitely be the 1% of players if you feel that way.
I would definitely say maybe going into the first time, it's like, yeah, let's go do Crota's once. But I probably would only have done Crota half as many times if it wasn't for just going to get the gear. I don't really feel like doing it every week from now to the end of time just to get gear because it gets monotonous.
Yeah.
It's a big problem you can run
I like
into
climbing
with
the
raiding.
mountain.
I mean, at this point, I would need either my arms or my head, and I'd be 32, and I literally have every drop from Crota's. I have all of the guns you can get on hard mode. I have everything else.
Yeah.
I don't even want to do it anymore. And that's because, for me, the loot has pittered out. I haven't gotten that drive anymore where I want to keep running it because I don't think it's interesting enough to keep wanting to do it on its own for the experience.
And I'd say that's a problem with the development of the raid.
How did older games approach these problems? How have successful franchises met these and dealt with these?
It's a great segue.
Yeah, I think the obvious example of a game that developed away from grind like this is World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It has content gating. It has progression. So when you're running instances over multiple weeks and things, the content takes time to complete. But it's done a lot of things to build measures into the content to take out RNG. Because the more of it that exists in it, the worse the experience is for the user over and over again.
Before you get rolling too far, being non-experienced in World of Warcraft almost completely, working through a story element incrementally. So you're not just going on a raid for gear; you're going on a raid for story. How do you feel that affects the gameplay?
I mean, they had that down with Molten Core. Molten Core had a huge storyline about going through.
I mean, you had to get attuned to go there in the first place.
You had to do all the quests beforehand. You had to do the quests to get Major Domo, and then get Major Domo to unlock Ragnaros. There was actually a lot of story there. It was set in this giant instance stack that had, Ubers, LBRS, BRD.
Well, Michael, I guess what I'm asking is that, was that a fun experience for you? Do you feel that was worth your time to do, and did it add to the gameplay experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah, unequivocally,
Nice.
yes.
Well, and I think that's the thing is, Nate would probably agree with me with this too. Blizzard's gotten infinitely better at that as time has gone on. I think even the oldest raids are some of the weakest now, especially because of how prevalent narrative is in terms of driving the raid content.
That's something that I'm very interested in, actually, because I stopped playing World of Warcraft after after Burning Crusade. I did a few of the raids, but I wasn't super invested at that point. I had other stuff going on in my life. But that's one of the things that I've always thought that World of Warcraft did magnificently, and I've only is telling a story through their content and through the gameplay, rather than just here read this thing and then go do this other thing that's sort of related.
Well, I think WoW's modern format for progression linked to narrative, and kind of how it supports it as a multiplayer game, is that Lich King is the example of it for me as an expansion, because the content supported through the questing phase, so the 10 levels you progressed over Northrend, is a narrative aligned to your faction in terms of you battling against Arthas's forces. And it culminated in Icecrown, which was the final zone, which eventually had Icecrown Citadel as the final raid for the expansion.
Where you kill Arthas.
Yeah. And the way they set that progression up was the whole time you were incrementally working towards that goal. You got closer and closer to your nemesis, who was there the whole time with you. Arthas would come in and he would interrupt your faction's progression forward. It felt like a fight against this character the whole time, and you were
a reoccurring villain.
Right. So they built up his significance so that by the time you got to his raid content, which was 2 years after, or a year after Lich King came out, you had built up this enemy. You had a relationship with him as a character, and that narrative strength created a drive beyond just getting the loot. The flip side of that was that was the beginning of them implementing a bunch of systems to remove RNG from the progression so that if you became attached to that narrative, you could continue to experience it and not be gated behind more and more content progressively.
Right.
One of the things that they implemented, actually I think in BC, was tokens. They changed it so you were no longer getting straight drops. You would get an item you would turn into a vendor afterwards, and that item was good for 3 classes chest pieces or 3 classes legs or whatever. And so the item had more use to a larger raid group. If you're bringing, at the time in BC, 40 or then in Lich King, 25 people with you into a raid, you get 16 drops and they're only usable by the same 5 classes, then those people would get decked out and nobody would get anything.
Right.
Putting a drop in that can be cashed in by multiple players for different pieces of gear meant that the drops didn't get wasted, so progression sped up.
Right.
They've gotten better at this as time has gone on, because now, at this point in Warlords of Draenor, loot is purely instanced to you. So when you're running, if you select it to be this way, they have a couple of different elective loot types, but...
So where it used to be round robin and free-for-all loot and that stuff, now they have...
they still have that. You can still do like a round robin straight drop where the loot is instanced off of the boss. You can do it where there's a master looter who elects where the drops go within a group, or you can do an instance looting system where the drops are based off of your own performance. So you might not get a drop off of each enemy, but when you do, it just goes straight into your inventory, and it's always an item you can use. So you'll only be getting items that help you on your personal progression. That removes tons of problems that the genre had been fighting against for years, with people bickering about the way the loot was distributed and running redundant content.
And doing that good old 50 DKP minus.
Yeah, having external systems like that.
50 DKP minus!
We were talking about like removing RNG, and one of the things that Blizzard has done is previously you would have like a class that could do either something that uses intelligence as a stat or agility as a stat, just using my own class of shaman as an example. In order to sort of compress the RNG factor, they've made it so every piece of loot that my class can use, a male piece, has both agility and intellect on it. So if I'm trying to build up 2 sets to help my raid group as a healer or as a DPS, I need less loot, so I don't feel as bad when RNG decides that I don't get anything.
Didn't they go about removing most of like the resistance gearing?
Oh yeah. Yes. Long ago they got rid of that. They've also, they've done with the ability glut beautifully in WoW as it's gone on, because they've removed tons of things that don't add depth, but added complexity. And culling the statistical gating behind things and stuff like that just created a better user experience.
I just like, for some people out there who aren't familiar with the term, RNGesus stands for random number, and it's a term for how you get assigned gear based on how you go in. And sometimes RNGesus is very kind to you and you get good gear. Other times, well, apparently you've been very naughty and RNGesus punishes you.
Yeah. Well, there's the random number generation, and it's just... What I think we're kind of talking about is that a lot of the franchises that have been around longer have streamlined their process because they've been listening to their players and they've been looking at the process. And I mean, I remember doing Molten Core and just getting, passed on for loot, over and over again, to the point where it wasn't fun for me anymore. There's 40 people in a raid that are all trying to get the same stuff. And you're sort of competing against each other rather than working with each other, because you're working with each other as like frenemies to kill the guy, but you hope that other person doesn't get that piece of loot because you want that piece of loot.
Well, I think that makes it a really good time to segue into what's probably the most important and also the worst part about cooperative gameplay, and that's the other players.
Well, that's life in general.
I can say... Obviously, you need the other players to go through, but I can say, especially after having done a week in Iron Banner, I want to give a shout-out to everyone with a name of, YOLO Swag Slayer XXX420666, who would top the map
name.
with 42 kills and 0 captures. I hope that Stannis Baratheon cuts your fingers off. Stop playing video games. That's not how you do control. Go back to Clatch. Just stop fucking me over.
Real quick, just before we get into people, Michael and Andrew, so with what we've been talking about in terms of it feels like there's too much, where in certain companies, and so far perhaps in the games that we've been discussing, where are the companies trying too hard? They're putting the players through too many loops when they could just simply spend their energy better elsewhere.
Did you
Well-
just segue my segue?
Yeah, he did say, well, we'll come back to the other people. I think that ties back into the previous topic is if we're talking about Destiny, everywhere, literally everywhere, they're making their players work too hard for things that they shouldn't necessarily need to. They've acknowledged that they really fucked up in the last expansion about how they went about having characters get new gear, how they outmoded all of their old gear and basically made it all useless. Which is just a classic problem of basically saying, yeah, you did all this content, throw that stuff away, you don't need it anymore. World of Warcraft trying too hard. I honestly couldn't tell you. It's been too long for me since I've played. Nate and Brendan would probably be a little bit better. Is there really anywhere that you can think of?
I think Destiny's biggest problems aren't mechanical, they're social, right? There's no matchmaking where there should be. There's no system embedded into the app to help you build these groups for content. There's no, like...
Artificial restrictions on content.
Well, yeah, but I don't think they've really built any. Like, for my money, I don't think Destiny is hard-gated for anyone.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so open and so accessible, it's just stupid. Like, the loot system makes no sense because everything in the game is RNG. There's no difference. Like,
Well,
no matter what you're doing, you have an equal chance of getting a good drop or a bad drop.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I've gone off on this a few times, but it's just simply things where restricting maps, not having certain arenas be available at certain times, and they keep messing with it and having certain styles of gameplay not be available. I get very angry because I feel like I paid for all of that, and there's somebody on the other end of the data line who's saying, well, no, you can't do that right now.
Yeah, I think you're right in that
Yeah.
sense that they've gated tons of content behind RNG pointlessly. I think the drops are a great example. Fran Mirabella, who's a VP of video at IGN, was on their podcast about Destiny last week, and he was talking about how after like 300 plus hours played of this game, he doesn't have Gallhorn. And
God, that pisses me off.
that's a gun that's essential for a lot of pugging online if you want to be taken in raid groups. You know, if you say you have Gallhorn, I can tell you from experience, if you're like Max Gala, want to run Crota hard mode, they don't care what your level is because you have a gun that'll take them down in one shot.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. So not having that is a huge problem, and there's literally nothing you can do to improve your odds of getting it. And that's really frustrating for a lot of people, especially if you're from a background in MMOs, because you look at a game like WoW, you look at a game like Diablo, you look at a game, even single-player games like the Elder Scrolls or something, where if you're trying to get at the highest tier equipment, there's a path to get to it. Even if some of that's gated behind you having to grind things like farm up materials or run the same instance a couple of times or something like that, there's a path to it. There is no path to like half the crap in Destiny. And then the second problem is that there's no hierarchy to it once you get it.
Yeah.
Like, it's mostly status symbols to get a lot of the items in the game because they don't net an enormous benefit.
Right. It's like all of the exotics that you and Michael have in Destiny where they're just taking up vault space because, yeah, they're good, but there's no way you would ever actually use all of them.
Are we talking about No Land Beyond again? Because that's still hanging out in my bank.
No, I'm talking about like the 800 guns that you have that you don't use.
Currently 27. Thank you very much.
All right.
So here's the
I use
thing,
like
and
20
I'm
of them.
going to try to attempt to segue back to Michael's segue. Sorry about that, man. But I think one of the things that perhaps makes this so frustrating is that now people don't have a clear, defined path to be able to become better team players and interface with other people online. And so that can become very frustrating where you may see somebody who just hasn't brought the right stuff to the raid. But I hate to put it this way, but maybe he's busy. You know, maybe he's got a bit more of a life. And, you know, it's one of these things too where I'm sorry, I was trying
Like,
to find
we
a better
don't
way to
have
say that.
lives.
But I mean, I
Okay.
know
All right, whatever.
I know plenty of people out there who, for their personality, for the way that they think, that all of this stuff would be incredibly beneficial to them, I think, on both a mental and an emotional level. And yet the only way that they can get exposed to this kind of beneficial challenge is to put in a significant time investment. And some people have kids, some people have demanding jobs, and the fact that, you know, they would have to sit there and lose sleep to be able to be a part of this experience, I don't think is fair to anybody involved.
Well, okay, that's a good point of the amount of time that you have to put in to be able to do the content. There's a lot of work that you have to do to get your character up to a specific level to do that. And I think that it comes back to the community of the people that you play with. There's a group called Dads of Destiny. They are
They're not bad.
no, they're really cool. Actually, they did a ride along with Bungie. They went through and did Crota a couple weeks ago, and it's great. I mean, they all have kids and everything. But honestly, when you're doing PvE content, it's half of it's about the gear, or actually maybe 30% about it is about the gear. 70% is about showing up and doing your job and doing it well. And if you can't, if you're working with a group of people who are, they're showing up and they don't want to do it, or you don't have a good working relationship with them, then it's not going to happen. A good example of this is last night we wanted to do Vault of Glass or Crota, and it was Nate, Michael, and I. We were like, oh, we'll find some people on the LFG. And then immediately upon doing that, none of us wanted to actually do that. Probably because we're antisocial, but also because none of us wanted to walk through these people and making sure that they're doing this. And
or
nobody
God's
wants
even
to
worse, running into somebody who's aggressive and hostile.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if I wanted verbal abuse, I'd go and
I'd
go outside.
So this is the thing for me on that is I'm of two minds, right? Because I feel like accessibility is really important and good in some games, and you need to have an environment where people can learn how to play the game.
Yeah.
Where they're not getting shit on by somebody verbally the whole time they're trying to do it, and where that matters. The flip side of that to me is my experience playing MOBAs, where people have no respect for where people come into a community like that and they have little to no respect for the accessibility issues with the game, which are part of them. There's a guide for Dota that is essential for anybody who's starting the game, and it's a guide for the first 2,000 hours you're playing the game, and it's called Hi, Welcome to Dota, You Suck. And it's 100% true, because you're dealing with a game that is played at such a sophisticated level, requiring huge barriers and burdens of knowledge on the player to be good at, that is what gives the game its complexity that's fun. That's the thing that's desirable about it. That's not true of all games.
It's kind of like a team-based chess.
Yeah.
Every single move matters and will matter, it'll echo back and forth for the entire rest of the game.
Right, and the satisfaction and fun of playing a game like that is that you're dealing with those complicated issues at a high level with very high risk, very high reward gameplay. I think in Destiny, you're getting players from a lot of different mindsets about how accessibility should be treated. The same's true of WoW.
Which is something the community's struggled with since the game came out.
Yeah, but I think it's true of any MMO. Nate says too about World of Warcraft. There are people who constantly are like, "Oh, they're watering the game down. They're making it easier for these filthy casual players to come in and play." Like, there's all these people who get really, really butthurt about increasing the accessibility of the game, because to them a lot of satisfaction was derived from the elitism of being amongst a small pool of players who were able to accomplish the goal.
On the topic of World of Warcraft, they actually, with this past expansion, they've worked a lot on the accessibility, especially for people who are just like, they don't have the time. It used to be like you had to do the regular dungeons, then the heroic dungeons, then you could start doing the raid content. But they've opened up the raid tier level gear. They've made it so that there's a lot more ways to get it. And actually, one thing I really like that they did this expansion is the base raid difficulty. They've made it so it scales to the amount of players that are in the raid group. So previously you needed either 40 people or 25 people or 20 people. Now you can do anywhere from 10 to 30, and you can drop in and drop out whenever you want. And raid bosses will get harder or easier depending on how many people are in there. And the raid group that I'm currently part of is a whole bunch of people who are just like, I don't have the time to dedicate to going at this hardcore. Hey, let's just get together and do this super casual thing. And it's worked out really well, and it's really fun.
On the topic of time commitment, another thing that really needs to be said is that there's a lot of mise en place and preparation as far as it goes with raiding, and there always has been. I know because I've led. Andrew's done it. Nate, you've led raids before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, Brendan has plenty of times.
Mike, would you mind doing a quick foodie dictionary addendum to mise en place?
Yeah, it means preparation.
Yeah.
It means showing up with your shit ready. But,
everything has its place.
Yeah, everything has a place. There's a place for everything. There's no English translation for mise en place. It's too big. I could do an entire hour conversation about it. But diverting from that,
look for that on the LAN party.
Michael cooks.
Yeah, I do this for a living. Fuck off.
Please let us know if you'd like a cooking segment.
Please don't.
We'll do we'll do a cooking segment. It'll be the Fable cooking segment in which Michael butchers a chicken.
Pay me or fuck off.
Wow.
What if we did a drunk cooking segment? Would that make it easier?
I'm
Beers?
actually really bad at drunk cooking. I'm going to say that straight up. Last time I did it, I almost sliced a finger off. It's not advisable.
What kind of chef are you?
The sober,
The sober?
one?
Wow, so you're in the minority
The
there.
relatively sober one?
A lot of mud going to chefs here.
We do a lot of drugs. Anyways, there was a point here in that I've definitely kicked more than one person out of a raid for not showing up with the right equipment, or having not watched or read the strategies for the fight, or having not shown up, with the right potions, not shown up with enough gold to cover their repair bills, etc., etc., etc. Not only is there the time commitment of sitting down with a group of people for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, but on top of that, there's an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours beforehand just for that raid of making sure you have everything you need just to go.
Well, and that's like really doing anything that requires a group of people, is that you need to show up. Like, I know that these are all video games and that they're meant to be fun, but when you're doing something with other people, like in any situation, you should show up ready and in a positive way. Like, bring something positive to what you're doing and be ready to do it.
I've got an interesting question for you guys. Think of it as a constructive exercise. If you showed up for a raid and somebody kicked you out, how would you like them to talk to you, and how would you like them to explain why you're being kicked out? Put yourself in the other person's
How
shoes.
have I been talked to, or how would I like them to?
How would you like
talk
them
to
to?
them?
We've already established ad
Okay.
nauseum that the internet people suck.
Yeah, I'd like them to be brutally honest of why I was kicked out, but I mean, there's no reason for, like with anything, there's no reason to be insulting about it, because generally with any raid experience that you've been a part of, if they've kicked you out, they probably have somebody who's waiting in the wings to come in and do your job well. However, we have people here.
I'm definitely not of the same mind.
Yeah.
If I kick somebody out, I
No,
want
no.
them
If you're kicked out, how would you want them to talk
the
to
same
you?
way I treat them, personally and degradingly, so that they never group with me again. There's like 10 million people on the internet to play video games with. I don't need to play with an idiot or an asshole.
I'm 100% with Brendan on this, and Nate was just giving me a look because he knows the story I'm about to tell.
Oh yeah,
When
I was there.
Yeah, the Scarecrow. When I was in high school, I ran a World of Warcraft guild with Nate and with Andrew. We were running Karazhan back in the Burning Crusade, and there's one fight in Karazhan that everybody wants because it's easy, and it's the Wizard of Oz. You do a mock-up fight against the Wizard of Oz crew, and on there's a Scarecrow, and as logic might make you think, if you throw a fire spell at the Scarecrow, he freaks out. So, literally, about every 10 seconds, one person has to cast one fire spell at the Scarecrow. And if you do this, you're pretty much going to win the fight. I mean, there are a few other modifiers, but as long as the tank knows their job and this one fire mage knows their job, you'll be fine. So we had a fire mage who could cast maybe 15 fire spells every 10 seconds. And we go in and we wipe. And I go, what happens? And one of my other captains, one of my guild officers, he goes, oh, the new guy, he forgot to throw the fire spell. I'm like, all right, it's cool. And I'm feeling pretty chill because it's the first wipe of the night. I'm not too angry yet. And so I instruct him, I'm like, hey, listen, just do, I don't even remember what the spell is. Your basic, little fire spell. You just got to do it once in a while. And honestly, don't even DPS anything else. We don't need it. It's easy. And so we do it. And we wipe again. And I'm wondering to myself, could it be the same problem? My co-captain goes, yes. Yes, Michael. It is the same problem. It was the same guy. And I go, all right, dude. So, are you having any problems in your end? Any lag? Is your computer not working? He's like, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay, because it's not. It's not fine. Do the spell. And so, after the third wipe, the screaming that ensues woke up my dog, alerted my family to thinking that there was some satanic ritual going on in the basement. And after ad nauseum screaming and cursing, I'm pretty sure I actually invented some curses that day.
I'm fairly certain you did.
Of just, why do you even fucking play this game, you little shithead kid? Get the fuck out of here, go home!
This is all coming from a 17-year-old kid in his basement of his parents' house.
He promptly left the raid group, left the guild, and I never heard from him again, and I've never been so happy in my life never to run into another person.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing. If I'm with people who are actually my friends, or even friends that I've met online, and I can benefit from them learning, then obviously I'm not going to treat them like garbage. I'll be like, look, this is why we can't take you tonight, or why we're going to sub you for somebody else. You can't do X right. We need to practice it, or you need to get better at it. But in the long run, in the words of Alfredo Diaz, don't bring people who die. it's ruining your good time.
Yeah.
And their lack of preparedness or their ability to adapt to the situation or learn or study the game on their own isn't something you can directly manipulate in the game. So just fuck off. Like, get out of my group, go learn it on your own and get in somebody else's group. Because the idea that you getting booted from a raid one night badly because you sucked means you'll never get to do it again. The only way that's true is, one, if you don't recover emotionally from being told you suck. Which, I guess if I were that kid, maybe that was the day I stopped playing WoW. But,
I hope so.
like, maybe
That was the day I become an international super criminal.
like, that's obviously not cool. You probably shouldn't do that to people, but that's also like a 1%er scenario. Most people would be like, wow, those people were mean. What incredible jerks. I'm going to go and do this with another group, and they'll get back, and then I never have to deal with them again.
Is it vindictive if I genuinely hope he quit playing WoW?
That's a little, yeah.
I feel like 10 years down the road, he's going to show up at my door someday. There's going to be some random dude and be like, hi, how are you? He's going to be like, hey, I was the fire mage.
He's got a gas
you,
can in his
dude.
Zippo. He's like,
never
dance
played
club.
I
I'm gonna burn your house down.
It's your turn to
Well,
run,
you can't hit my
Scarecrow.
house, so whatever.
20 years to track you down.
Yeah.
Well,
So
okay.
I'm gonna try to quick brainstorm some good qualities for a raid person. 1, be aware of your team. 2, try to be supportive of your team. Try and, sit there and how are you going to be an asset and how are you going to increase the gaming experience that everybody else is having. 3, don't die, because then other people have to carry you. I feel that this list is important too, because you guys have dragged me along on a lot of raiding and helped me get up to level and things. And there have been so many times where I'm like, why are these guys doing them to themselves? I'm 4 levels lower, and it's always this thing where you guys will be like, but you're very supportive of the team. You don't die very often, and you ask a lot of So number 4, ask a lot of questions. Don't be a jerk about it. Just sit there and try to get good, solid, constructive reviews of what's going on.
But
I know.
An important thing to remember is that your 4th grade teacher did lie to you. There are stupid questions.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think the better analogy for it is to think of yourself as a player on a sport.
Right.
Right.
You don't bring the guy who gives 50% hustle.
Yeah, you need somebody who's showing up and looks like they have initiative, and on top of that is not terrible.
Ooh,
and
so
if-
you guys run into a lot of people who kind of front.
Right, or yeah, they're lying about like what they know. Like the classic tell that I guess I can think of as a Destiny player from playing a lot of Pugs with Vaulted Glass is when you get into a group, you explain how you're going to do a fight, and this is the strategy we're going to use, and you get the kid in your group who's like, no, this isn't the way I've ever done it before. And he's already asked you 15 questions about positioning for the fight. He's already asked you like 10 things about where the drops are going to occur and everything like that. Like, he hasn't done it a million times. And he's like, no, this isn't the way my group did it before. And it's like, is it the way your group didn't do it, or the way you saw the YouTube video didn't do it this way? Or like, whatever. Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Okay? That is not...
I've heard those too, where these people, they're impressing you is so important to them that you seem to try and question that, and they get hostile. They get
right.
very
Like,
defensive.
I'd rather have them be like, I've never done this before, tell me what to do. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, great, then do
Number
this.
5, admit your ignorance. Admit what you don't know and what you need help on.
If I take somebody who hasn't done a raid through a raid and they said, I've never done this before, and I had 4 other dudes besides that guy who are, I know are solid, I don't care about carrying somebody.
Yeah, I don't
through.
care if they make mistakes. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's when they're like, no, I'm doing it right, and you're
See,
an idiot.
and
It's
that-
kind of
you're
like the martial
no.
arts. I don't know anything about the martial arts. Great, you don't have any bad habits.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's like whenever I do a raid, either in WoW, I did it for fun. I did it a lot more for gear back then, and the prestige of doing it. But when I'm going through a raid in Destiny, I'm doing it because I have fun. Like you said, you're like, why did they bring me through all this? I did it because I was having fun doing it. I like
Excellent.
playing the game.
That's all I could ask for,
Yeah.
really.
I mean, I play the game to have fun. If I'm not having fun, well, unfortunately with Destiny, I continue to do it anyway because I'm hopelessly addicted to this game to the point of I really should find some other games to play.
I'd like to add a 6th to James' list, and that's have no shame.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Listen, honestly, like, if you're out of heavy ammo, let everyone know.
Yeah.
Tell them that you didn't have enough. It's legit. It's
This stuff's expensive.
Yeah, that
Well,
way
like-
they know, and they're not expecting you to fire those Gala rockets.
Right, and then you can also admitting that problem aloud helps you avoid it in the future because you do feel ashamed.
Yeah.
Like one of the classic things, I don't know how much Dota you've played, Nate, but people who don't buy wards are basically like the bane of my existence.
Oh, yeah.
If you're
No.
playing support, buy some fucking wards. If you're starting Dota right now, buy wards. The only thing you should really do if you don't know what you're doing in that game is buy wards, because if you can't see the enemy will kill you. It's kind of a basic principle of warfare here, and it applies to that game eternally. And there are people who just straight up don't do it. What they don't.
What about somebody who can instinctually adapt to the fog of war?
Yeah. Well, what ends up happening, and it's a particular thing with MOBAs, is that there's a lot of third-party services that track stats. So you can look immediately after a game has occurred at every item everybody purchased and when they bought it in that match. And when you get these people who insist, like over and over again, they have some level of expertise, and they're just trolling through the match, like saying, woulda, coulda, shoulda, you should be doing it my way, you should be doing this, and they're failing on like the most basic skills, they're not worth playing with again. Because anybody who's going to pretend they know how to do something or just say something so they sound like they have a better grasp of the thing is just dead weight. Because they already have the social problem of needing to feel accepted by having an expertise, and that's not how you make friends. Nobody was ever so impressed with somebody's vast knowledge of something. They were like, I have to spend all my time with you.
I think that the topic that we're getting onto now extends far beyond just video games.
Sure.
These are problems that you run into everywhere.
That was actually
In
what I
an
was going to put
office,
forward on,
yeah.
For a number 7, is that if you admit your ignorance and somebody makes you feel dumb or lesser somehow for admitting that you don't know something, but you are willing to correct that, and they shame you for your ignorance,
Leave the group.
Is that
For your own
necessarily a healthy environment? No, probably not. And they're probably just big old tool bags, and you can leave them to go be alone by themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, too, is like, how did you get in a group where somebody treats you like that anyway? Like, if you're pugging with people and they shit on you for the way you're playing and you know you're not really doing anything wrong, just drop.
Yeah.
Get in another group with other people and play with your friends.
Yeah.
The real key is, if you actually want to get anywhere playing multiplayer games, play with the same group.
Yeah,
Because then you're all
absolutely.
learning at a rate that is at least fixed with one another.
Well, I think that segues to another great topic on how developers facilitate multiplayer in their game, and that's
Yeah.
guilds and clans. We all have a very fine Destiny clan that we get to play
The
with.
finest.
Truly the finest.
No, it's
yes.
not.
Steeped in lore.
Hey, we've
I
been
don't know, man.
slaying in
Sometimes
the
in
Iron
the-
Banner.
Yeah, with that no MMR to have us ever play against anyone else who's good. We're doing amazing.
Well, Brendan has a broken hand right now. The winter has finally claimed its first victim, his bones, and I think Nate said
Have I
it best.
told you the stories about what's been happening to my landlord? Just go ahead.
I think Nate said it best: is all the bones are there, they just aren't communicating well with each other. We were playing Iron Banner last night, and Brendan still topped the chart on our team for he's just a monster.
Well,
But-
you hear him sometimes shoutcasting about picking shots, and this guy can pick shots,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
Well, but like, okay.
So we're talking, how do guilds and clans and stuff factor into the multiplayer?
But I think this is like a great example of how
Yeah.
poorly facilitated the multiplayer is in Destiny because there's no MMR. I'm not that good at PvP with a broken hand. It's that I don't have to try. Like, we get into games where, except for one, we did play one clan match where they legitimately lost with all of their friends. But most of those matches, it was us versus 6 pugs.
We did, yeah, we crushed that clan. I kind of felt bad, but I mean, I think, you had like over a 2.0, I was like a 1.8.
Well, they got really heavily outplayed.
Yeah.
They just, it wasn't people who, I'm guessing, don't play a lot of Crucible because
yeah.
there's no real other explanation.
I actually don't think that people talk enough about team synergy in the game because
In
of so many.
Crucible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because so many people talk about it's like, oh well, it's any standard first-person shooter except for every 7 minutes when a whole bunch of kabooms go off, and it's one of those things that when you play with a group of people, you start noticing your matches and your modes matching up. But when you're able to stack your efforts one on top of the other, because you know that Mike's going to pop his bubble and then
Yep.
Andrew will have this ready to go. And so I'm just going to wait for them to react to this response, and then I'm going to come in with Golden Gun.
Yeah.
And it all seems to go off like it was preordained, but it's just simply because you know the people that you're working with and you can complement their strengths.
Exactly.
So then why is it fair that we're playing against 6 people who might not be on voice chat together because they don't actually know each other, have no idea how the other person's playing, and have never played together before? Like, that's just cruel.
Yeah.
And it
hurts to get
sucks for
steamrolled by a
us
team.
because, like, in Evolve, I know exactly where I am on Kraken right now. 648 in North America. Right? Like, I know how good I am at playing that monster. I am pitched against players who are around my skill level in the game. And the public and concealed portions of the MMR in that game continue to put me in matches that are close. That doesn't happen with Destiny.
No.
2/3 of the matches I play in Destiny are blowouts.
So, Brendan, you're saying that for you, having a consistent caliber of opponent to go against, that really increases your satisfaction with the game?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, I mean-
pub stomping people who suck at a video game is not fun.
No, it's really
did
it's
what was
not
it?
fun.
2 weeks ago we did it. We had a full fire team, all 6 people, and after the 5th win in a row, we were like, well,
We called it because
were
it wasn't.
done.
Yeah,
There was no point in playing anymore.
was
no
all-
one was going
yeah.
to beat us. We had perfect communication.
We were just ruining people's day.
yeah. No, that's
And you
like,
have to enjoy you have to accept it and, kind of roll with it. Because you notice how mad you can get when you're getting stomped on the other end. And when you're stomping on somebody else, you tend to, if you have any empathy at all,
Yeah.
you tend to
Well-
realize that there's probably somebody else on the other end going,
Yeah,
I
because
wanted
we've been on that side of
so,
being stomped,
You know,
and
when
that's
you,
but
when
like
you're steamrolling somebody, you realize it's like there's no honor in just rolling people under your wheels.
yeah, getting like 5 decisive victories in a row where the other team just is doing terribly isn't fun.
No.
And that, I mean, I do wish that there was an MMR in Destiny because I would have a lot more fun if I, grouped up with 5 or 6 of my friends and went through and played, and it was a close fucking game. Every single game that I've had a great time doing is either winning or losing by like 100 or 200 points.
Michael, didn't you? Oh, I'm sorry. But didn't you notice the other day that when, I think you pointed this out, that when you get a lobby that's like uniquely well matched, you're sitting there pushing as hard as you can to win, that it seems like that lobby tries to stick together for as long as possible.
Yeah. Anyone who plays Destiny, at the end of the match, you have the option to leave the lobby, and you can see how many people left. And I played a game the other day where the end score was within 50 points of one another, which in a 20,000 point game is horrendously close.
Yeah.
So
That's
we
like
only
heart pumping.
We only
close.
had 1 out of the 12 people leave the lobby. The other 11 stayed in because they wanted to play against each other again because they'd found this rare lightning in a bottle where everyone in the game was matched.
Michael, when he gets really excited, stands up while he plays. And for, I think it was about an hour, he stood up like 6 times, just sitting there, eyes wide, just in the zone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing, too, is it destroys, like, all of the parts that make multiplayer gaming fun. Like, when you play Smash Brothers on a couch with 4 people, the fish stories are what become the game. Like, oh my god, that guy came in as King Day today. We ignored him for the entire match. He just kept dropping this big penguin on us and killing everybody for like 10 minutes. You remember the story of the game because you're playing with a bunch of friends. You're probably around the same skill level because you tend to play with your friends, so you're using the same amount of
And
play
if your
time.
friends are better, you get better.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of that evens out. Those matches are genuinely close and memorable. When you play an online game, in order for them to stick with you, they have to be competitive. I can tell you right now, I could go off about 10 stories playing Evolve so far as the monster where it got down to the wire. Like, I had to play to the objective, no health left, 3rd evolution, using the skill sets, down to the tiniest little variation on how I placed each ability.
Will the monster pull it out, ladies and gentlemen?
Right, and like that kind of intensity straight up doesn't exist in Destiny right now. And when it does, it's purely by chance. You get in a lobby where everybody happens to be equal and plays very close.
Okay. I don't want to derail the topic, but we have a list of games. We've been
Yeah,
talking pretty heavily on Destiny and World of Warcraft. I think that's because
Sorry,
that's-
Destiny, we still love you.
Well, they're 2 good examples.
I'm really on the fence after what happened this past week, but that's not the topic of. Maybe we'll talk about that later. We should do an update of Destiny at some point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think actually that it is a multiplayer problem.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. But what are some of the other games that we got?
Some of the other games that people had picked out as examples of multiplayer experiences they felt strongly about. We had Portal 2 from Nate, which I think is an excellent example.
Yeah.
So,
I
Nate,
think we're going to get a lot of people being like, yes, Portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why I picked Portal 2, even though I've only done the co-op part of it once, like the first game, I feel like most everyone has played it. And the single player in Portal 2 is a lot of the same, some new mechanics, but the co-op is a completely new story, and the way they handled it, you still have the portal mechanic, but then you also have this other mechanic where your co-op partner is going to be pushing buttons, which is going to change the arena you're in. So you have to look at puzzles in a new way, and then you're going to do the same thing for your co-op partner, and it's a full story in and of itself. And I thought that was just really well done. I don't know how many of you have played Portal 2
I get
or
to
the co-op.
I get to play through the co-op with a buddy of mine a little while ago. Like I actually a couple of years ago, like right after it came out. And I remember it was great, exactly like that. Like you have the joy of the puzzling that you had in Portal, but you have it with this new tier of strangeness where like a lot of them are blind solutions. Where your friend's like, I need you to do this thing because then I can solve my room. And so you're like, okay. And so you're constantly bouncing off of one another. And then you'll have these really great moments where you know. Like maybe you look over and you have a line of sight to what they're dealing with, and you're like, oh wait, I know, I got to change this, hold on. And you bail them out with it. And it feels really great to get that moment of satisfaction where you're like, yeah, I anticipated ahead and you didn't die in the lasers again.
Or you intentionally threw them in the lasers, but hey.
Right. You're like, oh, was I supposed to hit the button?
I like that it's constructive problem solving.
Yeah,
it is.
Of something like that, where some other games, it's more of you feel like you're sort of fighting against a wall, whereas this one you're fighting against this moving puzzle.
You know, I could be talking out of my hindquarters, but the thing that I thought about was linear processing. And the whole thing where you feel like you're sitting there and you've split up the action in between somebody else whose intelligence you respect, and just watching it, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, success. It's a very strange feeling to describe, but I definitely identify it as a positive one. Because you're like, we are more than just two brains.
Honestly, and that kind of ties into what you just said. It ties into what Brennan has been saying about Evolve. Of when you do something by yourself, like if you beat a game by yourself, you feel good. When you beat it with another person, it feels, for me at least, it feels better. And Brennan's been playing a lot of Evolve, and I've played a decent amount of Evolve as well. And when you play as the monster, if you win, you feel great because you're the only thing that won. You don't have anybody else in your team and you're fighting against 4 other people. But if you lose, you have no one else to blame but yourself. Yeah. You're the reason why you lost.
Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of dichotomy of the two.
Well, I think it's interesting too because a game like Portal 2's multiplayer for me, I always looked at it as like rock climbing, right? Like if you have somebody who's going to be belaying or tethering for you as you're going up.
That's a really interesting analogy.
Yeah, you're codependent on one another for that. But the pacing of Portal really matches it because it's always this tick for tat. Like you need to get room A's problem solved or area A's problem solved to get to part B, and you're helping each other climb this mountain of madness to get through to the end. And because it's not really combat, the adversary is a puzzle, and because it's not as based around agility as it is like your own cerebral ability to work out the puzzles, you have this calm space you're in usually, where the two of you are just thinking about the puzzle and you're bouncing the ideas off of one another to solve it. And I think that game presents a unique kind of satisfaction to beating it because you don't just feel clever. Like when I play Puzzlers alone and I finally solve it, I almost feel like I did what they expected me to do.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm at least as smart as the people who made the game. I don't feel brilliant for solving a puzzle that's static. When you do it with somebody else there, it totally changed it. Like you're like, yeah, we did it. We figured it out. We're awesome.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before, but I definitely I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah,
now that I think back on it.
I think it's one of those things like the Grim Fandango, because that was just re-released. When you play through that, you don't feel like you're a brilliant guy for solving the point-and-click mystery of the Grim Fandango. You kind of are, because it really isn't the easiest or most intuitive game in the world, but you're like, every time you're even stuck on a puzzle, you're not thinking, wow, what a hard puzzle. You're thinking, God, I'm so fucking dumb. How do I not know how to do this? What is it the vase? It's not the vase. Is it the clock? Why does nothing do anything? Like,
look it up. Losers look stuff up on the internet. I'm smart enough to do this.
Right. And it's like, that's not true. It's a very hard puzzle. You shouldn't feel like that.
I had to get over and do more research, and it's okay, James, but I'm stupid. No, you're not for long.
Well, and Danny was talking to me. She's playing Majora's Mask for the first time. She got it on 3DS when it was re-released, and she's playing through it, and she was getting frustrated. Like, she was making good progress in it, but she'd get to these puzzles that I remember being very hard from when I played through it, and it would take her 2 or 3 tries to solve it, and then she'd be like, God, I'm so dumb. I can't believe I didn't just see that as the obvious answer. And after like the 10th time, I was like, babe, that game's hard. And it's confusing as fuck. Like, it's not giving you any hints to tell you to do this totally nonsense Japanese unintuitive thing. Like,
and sometimes I think that we as gamers, we are hard on ourselves. And there's research out there that the more intelligent you are, usually the harder you are on yourself. And it's one of those things where it's hard sometimes to be able to give yourself support and be psychologically healthy and those kind of things.
Maybe that's why I'm not so hard on myself.
But it's something
Maybe
where
I'm just not that intelligent.
You know,
You just
when-
call
Ain't
yourself
that
dumb.
bright.
I
So
did.
that's kind of
when you're
Andrew ain't that bright.
Ain't that right?
but when you're successful with somebody else, then you're not just jumping up and down by yourself like a crazy person. You're jumping up and down like a bunch of crazy people. And one of the best parts, I think, is that when you don't win or you don't succeed, there's at least somebody you can turn to and be like, you know what? I think we did really well. Let's try that again.
Success,
And it's
success as
easier-
a team is way more rewarding.
a great example of that is actually one of the other games that I had.
Just real quick, it's easier to keep your good old fashioned gumption up when you have, because I find on my own it's hard sometimes not to get bummed out when I'm thinking that I'm stupid. However, when you're hanging out with somebody else, especially a good friend, you know that there's somebody else in the room who doesn't think that you're stupid, and maybe you shouldn't waste that energy on self-pity. Maybe
Especially
you should
when
just try
they're
again.
stupid and you can comparatively know that you're smarter than them. At least.
And then mentally damage them and kick them out of your clan.
Another awesome game that I think is actually unique, despite the fact that it's replicated over and over again, is Diablo. I was playing Ultimate Evil Edition with Danny from when it launched on the PS4. I'd already played it and beaten through it on PC, but I went back to play it on console with her so we could play it together on the same screen. If you haven't tried it this way, you fucked up, because the best way to play Diablo is on console. Throwing the gauntlet down. I've played it through on both, and it is infinitely better on
Nate
console.
climbs that ladder.
Yeah, well.
he's upset about this.
I'll loan it to you. You can be a judge in firsthand, but it's amazing. The thing about it was, playing it with Danny was getting to go through the challenge of beating that game, and we'd ramp the difficulty up as we played, and we'd hoard loot together, and you'd down bosses together, and things like that. And it's a very linear single-player experience with a fair amount of difficulty baked into it.
What did you say? The couple that slays together stays together.
Yeah. and it was just like really fun to sit there and do that. And for Danny,
Next on new t-shirt ideas.
Yeah, it was Danny's first action RPG. She'd played some MOBAs and stuff online. She played shooters on PC heavily, but she hadn't played a game like that. So she was learning the new system and getting to play into these things. And she loved getting to do it. And at no time did she feel deficient while we were playing together, because she wasn't comparing herself to an online community. She's not pugging with kids on the internet who are telling her, oh, you don't know the strategy from Mathiel, you loser. Like, it's just me and her playing on the couch. Nobody's ever going to get in the way of it, and that's the way the experience was intended to be. And it had an incredible amount of satisfaction when you learned to do it on your own that way. And then getting to play through together in that sense, you both got to learn to do it that way.
Maybe, I think that might be why I like playing co-op more than multiplayer, like a competitive multiplayer, is that, especially with my friends, and actually almost exclusively with my friends, there's no unknowns other than the game. I can sit down with my friends and play through cooperatively, and I know how they're going to react. I know that we're competent enough to do it, and that it's more of a fun process to get through whatever mission or game that we're playing. And there's no surprises coming up. It's kind of like why I watch Star Trek The Next Generation, because I know that everything's going to be okay at the end of every episode. Except for when
Not a big fan of Game of Thrones?
except for when Locutus shows up.
Oh, the cutest Borg.
Hey, everything still
Sir
turns
Patrick
out
Stewart.
okay. Why? Because Picard has good people who watch his back.
That's true.
Geordie LaForge reading Rainbow.
Oh my god. Yeah,
Reading
strange aside, I
Rainbow.
associate that show with Magic the Gathering, because Danny and I have gone through 2 phases in life where we marathon watch that while we've been playing Magic. So I just have these like visions of every episode while I'm deck building in front of me. So like if I see the Magic cards, I think of Star Trek, and when I see Star Trek, I think of Magic cards. There's no sense
That's a
behind
weird
it.
association.
Yeah, it's really weird.
You're a weird man.
Yeah.
And one day
That's
you have
all
a
right.
dream where you're shuffling the cards and you look down and it's Geordie LaForge.
Yes.
Read a book!
Yes.
That's like when I think of doing that raid that Michael was talking about with Karazhan. I think of the basement that we were in, and I think of Code Red Mountain Dew.
Oh, God.
Because we would
Yeah,
we would
yeah.
go on trips. One of us would go to the Cumbies down the street and get a 12-pack of well, actually, we would usually get 2 12-packs because we would drink so much fucking soda.
I have weird associations in WoW. There's like places I go there where like I have like PCP flashback memories when I get there. If you go in BC's version of Draenor, if you go out to Netherwing's platform where you go to get your Nether Drake, you do all that farming out there. If I go out there, I start thinking of the Gnarls Barkley album.
Sane Elsewhere.
Yeah, because it came out like right around the same time, and I listened to it so much while I was farming
Actually,
for my
yeah,
Drake.
that's super. What is the zone? It's like the It's not Decilis. It's off of Thousand Needles. It's the sort of Feywild.
Feralus.
Feralus? Feralus, yeah.
However you pronounce
That zone reminds me of Demon Days. Gorilla's
yeah?
Demon Days. Because and it was during finals week, and we had just finished finals, and I was listening to that album and just grinding like one of my characters up through that
Del
zone.
the Funky Homo Sapien rocking you through.
No, Del was not on Demon Days. Del was on...
KMFDM, naive. I can't think of anything associated with Doom without those wonderful industrial guys. Just my head.
Doom 3 or the original Doom?
No, just Doom in general.
Doom.
Like, I played.
Just Doom in general, like
Well, I
the
think it-
feeling of Doom.
Wait a minute, no, because not Doom 3, so it had to have been either Doom 1 or Doom 2, you know, just simple before there was any kind of mouse up and down tracking.
Okay, gotcha.
And I ended up playing a lot of that because there was, I think there was a very minor online mode, and I would play with my friend who
Yep.
moved out to Arizona, and I would listen to industrial rock and roll while I played Doom, which I thought was amazing, and so now the two are intertwined.
Yeah.
To be honest, whenever I play Halo 3, or really any of the Halo games, I always think of Led Zeppelin 2 because they just blasted on a repeat through the entire
Yep.
campaign.
Yeah, with your dad. Your dad would come down and play Halo with us while
And
we
he'd lose
listened.
So
Yeah,
badly.
he was
It kinda
really
fun.
bad. He was just
It'd be like 50-3. Like it'd be embarrassing.
or Red Hot Chili Peppers. What was
yeah,
that double
what was that?
album that
Yeah,
they put out?
Stadium Arcade.
Stadium Arcade.
Why do I know all the albums?
Yeah,
Yes.
Stadium Arcade. No, but that
Music
game
guy.
that Red Hot Chili Peppers reminds me of it was one of the Battlefield games.
2142.
2142.
Yes.
We played a lot of 2142 back in the day.
Oh man, that was
was
a
a
great
good
game.
co-op
That is a good
experience.
co-op experience. Well, was it co-op?
Well,
It was multiplayer.
It was us three co-op.
Yeah.
And then doing Titan mode and like pod jumping over to the other dude's Titan.
Shit, that was a great
Inevitably,
game.
whoever took control of the Titan, they would just ram them next to each other, and we just shoot up through the drop pods onto the other Titan.
That was a good game.
Yeah, that was a really good game. I completely forgot about that game. Probably because my computer could barely handle it, and I got so angry.
One other game I wanted to give a shout out to too is actually Team Fortress 2, and maybe not because it has the greatest co-op ever. It has a really, really amazing, obviously, PvP game that's class-based, which has its own multiplayer issues around the classes. But one of the reasons, and I think the reason actually what Danny had suggested, is because of the co-op mode they put into it. Have you guys ever played the automaton fighting mode in this?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. I have not had fun experiences with it literally any of the times I've
There's
tried.
a co-op for Team Fortress 2?
Yeah, it's part of a narrative they built around Manco building these robot mercenaries, and it's like a horde mode, sort of like wave mode, where you're pushed through this linear environment, and you're trying to fend them off. And it's very, very tooth or nail class-based defense. And more so than I think a failing of skill or understanding, the mode just seems to have this like tendency to cause failure and punish failure brutally, like all at once. Like it won't glitch or anything, but the way it's set up, you really can't stop a lot of the bad things from happening. And then when they do, it penalizes you as if you had a way to get in front of it. And I can remember it was supposed to launch. I don't remember when it came out. It was like last year or the year before.
Yeah, it's been out for a while.
And they had this like clock on the website counting down to when you were going to be able to play it. And we got really excited because Danny and I have been playing a lot of TF2 competitive and having a blast with that. And we were like, oh, this will be really great. We finally get to play co-op mode. And the clock finished ticking down and the mode didn't work at launch. And so like for weeks you'd try and log into this game mode and it didn't work. And then finally one night at like 4 a.m. after playing video games like on this like mad bender playing with Danny was like, oh my God, I got into one of these games. It was great. We got really excited about it. And we got so salty within an hour of playing this thing because like, we just couldn't do anything in it. And there's probably people out there who are great at it or whatever, but God, it sucks. It's like so counterintuitive and not fun. And compared to the way the multiplayer of that game was, I was like, why is this even here anymore? Like, just let me play some more Capture the Flag. Sorry about that. We had technical difficulties and we're back. Yeah, I think we've gone over like a good number of multiplayer games and multiplayer experiences we've had, and definitely this is something we're going to keep hitting on. But I think the social aspect of gaming for me is definitely one of its most important parts.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I end up caring about it as much as I do with all these games. And I keep going back to have that experience again.
You get all these really uptight people, and they talk about how technology is making people antisocial and how, just how they don't understand the gaming culture, and so all they see is how insular it is and how, you know, these people are just kind of blanking out to the world around them. But they don't really understand, I think, the rich inner interaction that is going on, and the fact that, you know, if you're sitting down and you're putting some time and you're putting some effort in and you're legitimately challenging yourself to do something that's very difficult. And if you allow yourself to go through the challenge just like anything else, all of a sudden you find yourself hanging out with people that you would probably never meet, probably never talk to, probably never spend any time with, but you're sitting there having a great time talking with fun, intelligent people. And you forget about how bullshit everything can be once in a while.
Yeah. Speaking of which, shout out to 2 people that I've met that I'm still friends with from World of Warcraft, Brandon and Casey Freeman, out in Oklahoma, who are we still keep in contact, and they are actually supporters of this podcast. So
hey, thanks guys, we appreciate it.
Wait, seriously, they listen to this?
Oh yeah,
Brandon
post on the.
Yeah, he posted on the first. Hey, Family Snacks, how's it going?
Yeah. Let us know how you're doing. Send us some comments. Troll us. Please, somebody go on the YouTube. Say mean things.
One more shout out to our Destiny friend from Chicago, Ragnarokin.
He's from Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, doctor.
Yeah.
I was with him the other day.
I didn't know that. You got to go to Portillo's for us. Get us some hot dogs.
I think he gets the award for the coolest name I've heard today.
Yeah.
That's why I invited him to the group. I don't know, Ragnarokin, if you are actually listening to this, which you're probably not. I just want to let you know I totally cold invited you to that group just based on your name.
Yeah. Your name does brag.
Dude, he actually was really cool.
Yeah, he was a chill guy.
I've run a few things with him.
Yeah, well, definitely to let us know. What do you guys feel are some of the essential parts or problems of multiplayer experiences for you, and why do you keep playing games online? And also let us know if there's any games you feel like we missed out on that were just absolutely clutch important to the multiplayer experience of gaming. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. And you can track us down on the YouTubes. This is also available on iTunes and SoundCloud. And I encourage all of you to reach out to us at every one of those stops and let us know what you think and what you want.
So I think it would be cool if we had a byline, something to help close everything out.
Oh, I got it. I'll make a pterodactyl noise.
That's genius.